For the last 15 years, I've been on a quest to discover the DNA of the most successful digital leaders in the world. What makes them tick, what's in their minds and in their hearts. We are sharing deep insights from our world-class CIOs so that you get inspired, can learn and reach your full potential as a digital leader. If you are an ambitious technology executive, then I invite you to join CIONET. Join our community so that you too can realize your ambition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Mark Zawacki, and welcome to another edition of CIO Spotlight, where each week we put a digital leader in the proverbial spotlight somewhere in the world. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Rob Lloyd, who's the CIO of the City of San José. Do you know the way to San Jose? It's a city of over 1 million people. It's the largest city in Silicon Valley. Rob's constituents, the citizens of San Jose, are engineers at world-leading technology companies. So it's a pretty interesting angle to be thinking about the role of the CIO today when your constituents, your customers, your users are engineers at Google and Apple and Tesla, and not only that, but their headquarters and facilities are in your city. Rob has a long career in civic tech, specifically in the state of Colorado, Arizona, Oregon. I think those are the 4 states, and now City of San Jose. Rob, did I get the 4 states right, or was there a 5th one in there?
No, you nailed it.
Got it. So successive roles, pretty much all in IT functions in city government, and now you've been in your current role for about 5 years, I believe.
You got it, yeah.
Great. So Rob, let's jump in. What I'd like to do is look back a year or 18 months. You know, it's been kind of a traumatic thing globally, and then we'll look forward and talk about technology and people and culture and all kinds of stuff. But what was your perspective, you know, being the CIO of one of the biggest cities in America, and certainly at the heart of Silicon Valley, when you went into 2000, obviously the pandemic hit. How did you shift and orient the organization?
Mark, that's probably the most compelling question that all of us public sector CIOs have confronted over the last year and a half. And fortunately for the City of San Jose, we had established our IT strategic plan back in 2017, and that laid out a couple key goals for us. Part of which was to be more disaster ready. Part of it was for a more remote workforce. And in 2019, we actually did a pivot about equity and said a lot of the challenges that we were seeing come up for our city and other cities were around how to connect and help the hurting parts of our community. And little did we know that those ingredients would come to life in March of 2020 when we did the disaster declaration for COVID and joined so many others. And fortunately, San Jose, and you have some background in this area, super well educated. We have 85,000 of the world's top smartest businesses in the area, super smart public servants. And if there was ever an area that was ready for COVID, it was the Bay Area in America. And so they made early smart calls around shutting things down, protecting lives. And that was our mission. We said our city's emergency operations center was around protecting lives and protecting livelihoods. And very quickly, we had a kind of a 3-stage plan, which was reconnecting people so they could do the things that helped our community. Number 2 was to help people connect in ways they hadn't before because we're an instantly remote workforce. And the 3rd was how do we do things better and offer digital services that connect people and provide services that they need now and into the future in ways that were going to be more helpful to them. But there's a very human side to the last year and a half, and something I think that connects us with the next 5 and 10 years.
Got it. And I'm a former resident of San Jose. It's been, gosh, more than a decade, but I do know the area well, and I know where the big city building is there.
Yep.
I was often humored that, you know, we have a planning department, you got to do zoning, and here's this giant city skyscraper in the middle of a residential neighborhood. But I was always humored by that. How did that get through planning? But you know, that's a pretty complex building, a lot of services. How quickly did you get that cadence back to normal? Because you know, you go in there and everyone has their cubicle or their desk, and they're on city systems, and suddenly they're remote and they don't have access to, you know, the ways of working anymore. How quickly do you think you were, you know, back up and running without the accoutrements of the office?
Generally speaking, we actually did an operational assessment report about 8 months into the pandemic. And for the most part, we were able to switch to remote in some areas in a day. In others, it took more like a week or two. But the shift actually was pretty effective because the tools, more than ever today, are there for us to make those transitions and work remotely without a lot of the old barriers in the past. We had to close some cybersecurity gaps. We had to get hardware into people's hands that previously hadn't had it. But those logistical items were pretty manageable in the grand scheme of things. And fortunately, we're able to get back to the people's work pretty quickly. The other big shift, Mark, is just how many people got absorbed into the Emergency Operations Center and that pandemic response. And now we're heading into the pandemic recovery, but this iterative variant step. But by and large, city services, except for like planning and a few others that are very high touch in field, and were impacted by construction sites stopping down, different trends in police response and fire response, those types of things. As the community had some changes and shifts, we had to do those. But for the most part, city operations were back up and running within days to 2 weeks.
I want to touch on equity. You mentioned that it really is the lens by which you look at all city services now. It sounds like that it's the linchpin, so to speak. But can you describe what you mean by equity? How it? Let me take a first cut at it. But it sounds like, you know, you've got city limits. You know who your constituents are. They come from different economic backgrounds. You know, some are unhoused. You know, some are, you know, between employment, but you're trying to use equity as a lens to say, there's a suite of city services we have to provide to everyone on an equal access basis, on an affordable basis. You know, this trickles down to, you know, transportation, everything. But did I get that right? Is that how you're kind of framing everything?
Yeah, and it's actually the driver, I think, that you'll hear for every urban center, at least in North America. And equity, if you take a look at a couple different ways at the problem sets in front of us, you're right about blight, about housing insecurity, food insecurity. If you talk about that homelessness, if you talk about police reform, transportation and how transportation is changing, every one of those actually has a singular lens of equity, through which we look at our community and say, who's it affecting, how much? And in the pandemic and arising out of it, are all of our parts of our community, especially the hurting ones, positioned to do that recovery well and have an equal shot at succeeding and being whole in the future. And so for us, our strategic plan that we just set, and actually today I'm in front of the council to confirm it, enable equity solutions is the number one part of our strategic plan, along with securing a resilient city, optimizing, powering a digital public and a digital workforce, and then procurement and partnership.
Let's give me a couple of case studies or how to think about it in the context of food, or in the context of housing, or in the context of transportation or digital services. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, let me give you at least three, and how profound those challenges are. And let me start by just giving kind of some cut and color. Is if you listen to what I'm about to say, realize also that it's not just one department, it's not just one community. These are kind of boundaryless and affect a lot of folks. And so it's going to require new thinking, which is kind of the innovation in civic tech that is multidisciplinary. So one is, for example, housing insecurity. And the gnashing of teeth and struggle with the eviction moratoriums. So in the middle of a pandemic, you definitely don't want people evicted. You don't want them finding where to congregate and going through those struggles, because that'll impede your health response and negatively impact your trend of infection. And also the look of seeing so many millions of families that are behind on rents because of the economic impact of the pandemic potentially be out in the street. And then also the impacts on landlords, small landlords who didn't get their income so they could pay their mortgages and stay whole, and the overall impact on housing stock. The Bay Area housing, the amount of houses you have versus the amount of jobs are way out of whack. So housing prices are extremely high. And so it creates another set of social ills. Another one was food insecurity, and people couldn't go to restaurants. People couldn't actually go to those senior programs where they could get fed and otherwise wouldn't have food and care and necessities. And instantly standing up a food company to get out tens of millions of meals to a community of 2 million. And the county, as they struggled with the health response, asked the City of San Jose to take over all care for food and necessities for the entire county. And then that going all the way to police and justice reform and how we're connecting our community and our public safety functions to maintain that trust that you saw in lots of communities has been eroded. And our police department was one of the first to talk about how you engage with the public and make sure the police department is theirs rather than a force function. It's a part of the community's progress and safety. And so all of those go into that fabric of a community that's really heading forward, going to benefit from technology in this multidisciplinary approach, but really gets at, is the community a whole community, and how can people access opportunity and success? And Silicon Valley, very diverse, very much a meritocracy, lots of resources, some weird idiosyncrasies of how that fabric kind of pulls and tugs sometimes, but very successful on the balance of those ingredients.
That's great. And I'm going to assume that you're plugged into a lot of other CIOs nationwide, and you guys compare notes and best practice. And I'm sure that you're borrowing ideas and apps from each other.
Yeah. So one of the greatest things about the civic tech space is, unlike the private sector, we like being first, but we like sharing just as much. And we actually lift each other. So if we have a great contract, a great vendor, a great project approach, some learnings, we share those openly. And for example, some of the associations I'm a part of, one is Metropolitan Information Exchange. It's started in San Jose, oddly enough, in the 1950s, where it was public sector IT folks, data processing, I think was the term back then, but saying, how do we share the stuff that does work and does succeed and helps lift communities, and then we ladder on top of each other. So there's no competitive advantage. We really try to support and do that rising tides type of concept.
Right. And when you say civic tech, is this something Silicon Valley gets excited about and funds startups, and there's no shortage of civic tech startups banging on your door? Or is this more of a term of, within large cities and medium-sized cities, but CIOs recognizing that there's, technology need to be built probably internally, to solve some of the bigger problems, like the equity problems you discussed earlier?
Mark, that's actually a very insightful question. And the reason why is GovTech is a sales segment, right? Selling to local government. Civic tech actually refers to a mission and the connecting of that technology with public benefit and where communities need to go. And so as a practitioner, very much a civic technologist, that we're applying technology and data to unleash the brilliance of folks in our community and nationwide, really, to get at the heart of some of these problems and to fix them at scale. And GovTech refers to basically the sales segment, and there is a big difference between the people we call vendors and kind of spray and pray products at us and say, don't you want to buy my awesomeness? And then the people who are committed to a mission, saying we can connect that with kind of a platform approach that helps you solve multiple problems in the future, not just one, and that we're part of the solution for many things. But it's actually kind of a perspective that we wish more vendors would understand. There's lots of good salespeople, lots of good products, but when you connect with that mission and that future, then you're going to position quite a bit differently and have different conversations with us that are going to be more compelling.
Right. And having both of us spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley, a software company gets of a certain size. It then has it goes after public sector as a vertical. And then it says federal, state, and local. The bigger budgets tend to be in federal and state. And, great, if the local CIO will return their call, they'll try to sell them something. But you're drawing a huge distinction between those public sector or those vendors of the public sector practice than you are civic tech.
Yeah, and then some of the vendors get it big or small, but the public sector, just for frame of reference, Mark, is you've got 30,000 in America, cities and towns. You've got 90,000 local governments, counting utilities districts, school districts, and so forth, water districts, and they spend in the order of magnitude tens of billions of dollars on IT a year, and a lot of that piecemeal and disconnected. Right.
But again, to be clear, where is this technology coming from? Are people then developing civic tech apps, and is there kind of a known ecosystem of vendors, or is it more it's being developed by the cities themselves under some guidelines and principles?
It really is done well in partnership, and there's kind of a base, which is a lot of the common products and services that you might hear about with a government flavor. And so you'll see the Salesforces, you'll see the Oracles, you'll see the Microsofts, you'll see the bigs, and that makes sense, right? Because they've created a product and you can transpose that over into a specific area of use. Last 5 years-ish, and even some government-specific venture funds, right? About how to layer on top of that the high-value stuff that's not just normal table stakes technology. So our success has been going through the partnerships with the bigs, the middles, and the smalls. Everything from Dell's been a great innovation partner with us, so is Oracle. To the mids, and you have all the way to the smalls like Urban Logic, and how we're using data across planning and development and transportation and economic development to say, how do we design communities differently and actually see data in ways that those three used to do independently, and now we see how they affect each other. And even armor blocks, and saying how to use AI to protect yourself against business email compromise and some very sophisticated cyber attacks. So we try to run the gamut between the extremes, because a lot of them have great solutions that can solve community problems. But yeah, your sensation is right, is that there are common verticals, and there is specialness to selling in government, especially the long lead times.
And you mentioned, the 30,000 municipalities in North America or in the US, but 90,000 when you start counting school districts and utilities, et cetera. Does your civic tech plan, your vision, then integrate into those school districts and integrate into those utilities? And me as a proverbial resident of San Jose, that's all kind of integrated, and you're working with them as ecosystem partners?
Mark, we have touch points, but it's not quite so integrated, and that's one of the challenges of civic tech, is to make those barriers fall away. So for example, let me give you a few. One is, so we did a proof of concept about Wi-Fi connectivity in areas of school need with Eastside Union High School District. And so that was in a Title I school attendance area, which means 80% free and reduced lunch, a proxy for poverty. And we proved that out in the middle of the pandemic. As soon as it started, those school districts and those families came to City Hall remotely, of course, and said, you need to take that and take it to scale across all of our attendance areas, because our kids and our families are falling behind. They can't get educated, they can't work, they can't access remote health. And so instantly we took something that was covering 30,000 people. And we said, all right, we're going to implement the next two phases that we had planned, and now we're at 100,000 people. And by the end of first quarter of 2022, we'll have covered by Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi networks that are free, and cellular hotspots in partnership with AT&T, roughly 300,000 people. And so in the middle of a pandemic, you can do these kind of forcing functions. Another one, in the sense that you talk about integrating with other communities, is how do we approach 311 and language translation to remove the barriers of access that some people might have because of technology and language? And how do you open up phone and mobile and online and direct chat and chat bots and virtual agents, so you can come as you want and speak in your own language and still get access to all those city services. And we tried to do actually a national 311 where it's like, let's agree on a standard, and we can, when it comes to the city of San Jose, but it's really the highway department for the state or the water district will auto send those. And the answer we got was like, we got enough work, let's not. But we're going to have to overcome some of those challenges, because those are the things that make the edifice of government easier and more simple for our community. And that really needs to be the charge.
So you mentioned this citywide Wi-Fi. For the uninitiated, San Jose is a significantly large, I don't know how many square miles it is, but it's a very large area. The boundaries is quite large. Yeah. Do you now have a mesh network, or do you have some citywide Wi-Fi, or is it in certain corridors and more densely, populated areas?
Yeah, so we target 3 areas. One, and it has 3 purposes. One is the digital inclusion portion, one is the economic development portion, and one is the city portion, city business portion. And so that digital inclusion area covers the parts of the community where we've had a partner in the Eastside Union High School District to cover those attendance area, Title I attendance areas. We also have, if you land at our airport, go to our convention center, go to our downtown, you'll also have one network that you have connectivity between all of those. So you land and you're connected in that kind of common core. And then we had the National Football Championship for Collegiate Football Championship, and the activities for the Super Bowl had campaigns with those teams and the NFL and the NCAA to create media events and activity events. And so that's the economic development side. And then we also have the city use side, like the downtown network, and how we can connect to that wireless network and actually do city business. So it's actually not completely across the community, but in those areas of focus.
Got it. And probably the economics to put it into the suburban areas doesn't make sense, right? They're all going to have their own.
Yeah, and yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. And just for frame of reference, so San Jose is 1 million plus people, and about 85,000 businesses, 185 square miles. You compare that to like San Francisco, which is about 40 square miles, about 850,000 people. They have shrank more during the pandemic, but yeah, very, very large in comparison to our little siblings up the peninsula.
So 4.5 times larger physically in size, and about 20% more population.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot to cover. And I'm always intrigued, Rob. I didn't mention the intro, but our families go back a very long way. My father, my sister, and we went to the same business school a long time ago. But you're the CIO sitting in Silicon Valley. What is that? What unique perspective does it give you? Do you get too many startups banging on your door trying to sell stuff? Does it give you an insight on technology trends that perhaps a CIO elsewhere may not have a front seat to? I just think you're in a very unique perch as CIO of the biggest city in Silicon Valley. So kind of elaborate on maybe some learnings from that, or takeaways, or what other CIOs could gain from your expertise there.
Yeah, let me take a kind of step back, and then I'll drive forward. Is one of the things about being a public sector CIO is that we are given this beautiful community, and our responsibility is to put our best efforts into it and pass it off to the next person more beautiful, more remarkable than what we received. And that's a deep calling, right? If you identify with that mission, you get a lot of reward, and know the legacy of your work isn't that necessarily will be rich, because I'll never have multiple houses, I'll never have a yacht, I won't even have a Tesla S, But the legacy of the work is that we made a community stronger and families thrive and businesses grow. And so that calling is a very special one. And it allows you, to answer your question, to then use a couple superpowers that don't normally exist. Like I can team up, and when we assembled our cybersecurity advisory board and we reached out to folks, we literally got the chief security officers, chief information security officers, 11 out of 11 that we hit up said, yeah, let me pitch in. So we got Kaiser Permanentes and Salesforces and Oktas and the director of the Markula Center for Ethics and all these folks. You can tap this community in ways that is absolutely phenomenal. And when I was in Arizona or Oregon or Colorado, I might have gotten 3 or 4 of those. But here you're right in the heart of it, and people who probably literally could do your job better than you, and they're willing to team up and be a part of something better for the community. And then the other part of that is that we do the additive work. And when you're mission focused, people step in and contribute. And we've been able to do amazing partnerships like with Zoom and with Armor Blocks and with Microsoft. And they do things not just for the dollar, but the kind of the fillable hour as well. And they team up in google.org. Those partnerships are there if you can execute and have that reputation. And the benefit is something that aligns with the values of our corporate partners and our nonprofit partners. So that's actually our superpower. You've in 20 minutes hit on one of the special strategies that we use in San Jose. Is we're the leanest big city in the country. We're the only big city that during the day exhales in population rather than inhales, because our residents go to Apple or Facebook or Google. And then they come home and use city services. But we're the big city that shrinks during daylight hours. But that mission, the partners we can tap, that amazing brain power is something that we use to cover what we don't have in terms of large staffing and large financial resources. And that's how we got to be the most innovative city in America in 2020 and over the course of 4 years, that progress plan.
That's fascinating. So it's almost like flex. You have this certain flex, and these partnerships are abundant, and the pay it forward mentality, the meritocracy, they want to help. They want to have a big city that's referenceable in their backyard that they did some work with. So it sounds like you've got a very strong bench to get stuff done that, as you said, a superpower. It's just unique to the geography of where San Jose is.
Yeah, and it's a magnified one because I've done these partnerships with bigs, mediums, and smalls and elsewhere in my career, but to be able to come here and have like a fully stocked pond, man, the fishing's good, but you do have to have a good filtering process. Because I literally get 200 to 300 emails a day, and I would say about 100 to 120 of them are people with amazing things to do, but we're very clear about what our strategic plan is, what our IT work plan is, what our priorities are, and those are even posted on the internet so the whole world can see. And we update that every quarter, but those partnerships are very directed. So
you're saying you get 100 proposals a day, roughly, on let's go do some stuff together.
Reach outs. There's probably within those 100, 120. Yeah, there's probably maybe 10 of substance if you really want to go to town. But there's a lot of people that hit us up. But you probably know that. I mean, the community is huge.
Yeah, fascinating. Hey, half an hour goes quick. One last question here before we wrap up today. You must have a tool in your pocket, like. What's Rob known for when you can come into a situation, come into a new project, a new role? You're with your team, and you're gonna pull something out of your pocket to get some results. But what's the one takeaway or the tool or the methodology? What would you like to share with other digital leaders, to get something done?
I would tell you, Mark, and I wish I knew this at a younger age, just how much the relationships and the partnerships matter, especially in governments. A lot of people can say no. And I imagine it's like education where no one's ever wrong. But people are coming and they have hard jobs and they're trying to do that job well. And it doesn't help for someone to come in and say, I know better. And so to be able to listen, to be able to say, let's go where the organization needs us to go. And it's not about pride, but we're going to focus our energies and resources in the areas that help the most and help at scale, and what a city is supposed to do. That is the superpower, I would tell you, the special tool. You'll be amazed how successful you can be when you connect with the mission and with the people and solve the problems that need solving, rather than have your own personal biases or specific pushes because it's worked for you before. And so I've been in states, I've been in for locals, from 25,000 to 1 million. State had 6 million residents in Colorado, right? And that's always been the key. And then, to be honest, Mark, it's also the thing looking back, I never ever remember how amazing the technology was, or how big the project was, or how much status I had. I remember the people I got to work with and the problem that I got to solve. And if you come from that kind of humble place, you'll be amazed at how much good you can do.
That's great. Just wonderful. And Rob, thanks so much. I know on the West Coast there, you got up pretty early to make this call happen. I think we started a little after 7 today. So really appreciate getting up so to make this happen. For our regular viewers, same time next week, we'll have another digital leader on. Again, Rob, thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Actually, if I can say one thing, Mark, is just a note of gratitude to the Zawacki family. You guys have been good people, and you and your siblings, to your father, just a wonderful family in tech.
Rob, that's wonderful. I'll share your sentiments, and no doubt Dr. Bob will reach out. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, take care. Thanks so much.
You too.
Bye.